Good afternoon, everyone. I'm back again from yesterday. Today is 14th of October 2025, and here I am back again with another video, but with a different perspective today. New day, new beginnings, as they say. So, as you can see down there in the thumbnail, as you can see down there in the thumbnail, we are going to discuss about the fundamental principles of World War II. So you might have seen those documentaries which discuss about World War II at a very vague perspective, saying like there were these battles across the countryside in Europe and all across the world and everything. I mean, they might portray all these war things as pretty vague and all that stuff, and also some channels also portray all this in a very detailed manner, but what all these channels or these documentaries or these articles miss out is the fundamentals, the basic principles which laid down the foundation of this global conflict. So it's so this is not like a series. This is not like a scientific equation which we're talking about. This is about a series of things and philosophical ideas and incidents which all combine together like a Swiss cheese, which all form together to make the right puzzle for this global conflict to occur in the first place. So in this video we're going to discuss about those fundamental principles. So here I have this book, Great Battles of World War II, How the Allies Defeated the Axis Powers. So we're gonna use this book a bit, and here. So the contents of this chapter says Western Europe, North Africa, the Russian front, the Pacific War, victory in Europe, and victory in the Pacific. Okay, so these are the six phases of the wars. So if you are not aware, the war lasted from 1939 to 1945. But now we have to understand how did the war first came to be happening in the very first place. So for that we'll have to dive deep back down to World War One. So in World War One, the allies I'm referring to the Triple Entente. Triple Entente, basically, they had defeated the Triple Alliance. The Triple Entente, which comprises of the United States, UK, Russia, and France. They had defeated the Germans, the Austro-Hungarian army, and the Turkish forces, or the Ottoman forces back then. So after that, in January 1919, there was the famous Treaty of Versailles. Which had very harsh demands and reparations which Germany had to fulfill and give to the countries that had lost a lot of resources during the war. So this Versailles Treaty was very harsh upon Germany. It also stated that Germany could not have an air force and a navy, and their army could be no bigger than a small force of less than 100,000 people, soldiers. So it was pretty harsh for the Germans. They had to pay around 10 billion marks or more to the people and to the countries that had won but had lost a lot of resource in the war, and to the Triple Entente countries. And for a matter of fact, these reparations were so high that recently, in the 21st century, somewhere around 2010, in the 2010s, did Germany actually finish giving the final payment for these reparations, around 2012 or something. So imagine, over a period of more than 100 years, almost 100 years, did Germany take to give these reparations. Like, wow, that took a while. That was World War One. So then, amongst all the diaspora and the chaos that was happening in the German states, arose one man with a mustache, not like mine, but a shorter one, short mustache like that. You know who I'm talking about, right? None other than Adolf Hitler. So Adolf Hitler basically, he rose to the occasion. He started getting involved into political gatherings, started getting influenced, especially by Karl Marx's uh, principles about communism, principles about communist ideas in his famous book Das Kapital. So, if you're not aware, Karl Marx was a famous economist and a scientist, and he was a German. So, his German books like Das Kapital, which was against the capitalist mindsets, it proved to be very significant and very influential on Hitler's ideologies. So he started getting more involved in political gatherings, and then the unstable Weimar Republic, which had been formed after the chaos of World War One in Germany, so saw it going downhill very quickly because the German mark, which was the currency back then in Germany, the German mark, MARK, had lost its value exponentially. There was a hyperinflation seen in Germany, and salaries had to be paid in trunks. Trunks I'm talking about is literal trunks. Boxes represented actual salary for a citizen. So in 1923, a loaf of bread in Germany costed around 200 billion marks. So you can see the hyperinflation that it had caused in Germany had resulted in a lot of loss in value of the German mark. And also note in consideration that many Germans had actually hoarded these money and had actually started printing out more of these money, but that printed money did not have a value of its own, so the value just went down further and further. So since more notes but the value remained the same, that notes, the increment in notes, saw an exponential decrease in value. Henceforth, the value of the German mark fell, and there was an economic crisis in Germany. Amongst all of this, amongst all the chaos, Hitler and his friends and his homies basically, like his party members, they all had different ideas of their own. So they took an opportunity of this chaotic situation in Germany and tried to reinforce another government amongst the Weimar Republic and try to influence them. So they had the famous Beer Hall Putsch. The Beer Hall Putsch, I don't know how I'm pronouncing that. I hope it's a correct pronunciation. But the famous Beer Hall Putsch happened in 1923, which was basically Hitler and his party workers and his party members just marching in the streets of Berlin, and this march happened after a famous speech which was given by Hitler against the capitalist members, which were of the Weimar Republic. I think this was somewhere around in December 1923. I cannot exactly recall it currently, but this famous Beer Hall Putsch happened, but it was severely repelled by the German forces, by the German police forces, and many of the party members were killed, and Hitler was injured. And then he was sent to around a few years on house arrest, but then he was released 9 months later. And then Hitler then further went on to continue in these party discussions, and later on he slowly rose up the ranks in the 1920s up to the early 1930s, and by 1933 he became Chancellor. So as you can see, Hitler started becoming more influential in the German society, further went on influencing his ideas of Hitlerism or Nazism, and then in 1933 he became Chancellor finally. So as you can see, Hitler's rise. This is the first part of what actually caused World War II. So now Hitler is in power, right? So now Hitler wants some things to be put right. So he knows about the treaty. He knows about the Treaty of Versailles and its severity on the people of Germany and how it has severely affected the German economy and the German socio-economic situation in the entire country. So, what did Hitler do was that he straight up started violating the Treaty of Versailles because he simply did not care. The treaty was genuinely pretty harsh on them. They were not allowed to make an army, air force, navy, and they had to pay a huge, excruciating amount to the Triple Entente countries, which was simply not possible for them at the time because, as I said earlier, they finished the payment in 2012 or somewhere around that. So Hitler started officially violating the treaties and everything. He started developing the Luftwaffe. He started developing more armed technology. He started training his armed men more. So from around 100,000 men, he straight up broke that, and he mobilized around 1.5 million men amongst many divisions, around 55 divisions back then in the German army. And by around mid 1938 to 39, Hitler's armies were ready and well equipped for another war, a rematch basically of World War One. So this is part 2 of basically what led to World War One. 2, sorry. So now we have the Hitler's ideas completed, and now note in consideration, in 1929 there was the Great Depression. So the Great Depression was an entire sort of global recession that occurred across the world, especially in Europe and the United States. The Wall Street stocks crashed in 1929 because everybody started selling their shares and everything, but the values of the shares did not increase, they just decreased, and then there was an entire crash of everything, and then that led to extreme poverty and unemployment. So much that 200 men in Jarrow, England, marched all the way to London, 200 miles away, to raise this awareness about unemployment in the country. But sooner than later, by 1936, many countries had started lifting their citizens out of poverty. But then, on the other hand, Germany had started developing and violating the treaty very quickly, because the Germans had a very beautiful opportunity to take advantage of this Great Depression, because the British and the French were actually not focused on whether Germany was violating the treaty or not, because they were far more busy than while trying to help the people get out of poverty. So while they tried to get them out of poverty, on the other side, the Germans were just straight up violating the treaty and all. And by 1939, when most countries had raised their men out of poverty and hadn't precedented a German rematch or sort of thing, Germany had already mobilized and was ready for war. So basically it had to get revenge as soon as possible. So then Germany started looking around its areas and started to target Poland. Poland, a newly formed country after World War One, was something that bothered Germany, because Poland was actually part of Germany earlier, but then after World War One, Poland was formed, but this kind of annoyed the Germans because Poland was actually their land before, so the Germans wanted to take back this land through brute force or everything. So then Hitler started doing this tension or attention-seeking strategy against the presidents, against the prime ministers and the heads of the countries back then, like Neville Chamberlain, who was the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom in 1938. So he had to go to Czechoslovakia because Hitler had actually threatened Czechoslovakia, so that if you don't accept to get into our country, then we'll invade you, or if you do accept, we won't harm you or anything. So Czechoslovakia was stuck in a fix. Like they had to get up with Germany. So like they had to negotiate. So Neville Chamberlain had to intervene because Neville Chamberlain was the head of the capitalists or the Triple Entente ideology, basically. So basically Neville Chamberlain had to negotiate with Hitler, saying that you should not invade Czechoslovakia right now because that's not a good thing, and yeah, you're straight up violating the treaty. But he simply didn't care by then, because poverty had actually, you know, affected the country so much that he was not that Neville Chamberlain was the struggling to understand the seriousness of the situation. So then what happened was that Hitler then gave his false words, saying that I would not invade Czechoslovakia, fine, and all. So Neville Chamberlain was like, okay, that's sorted for now. And then sooner than later, he finds out that Germany is invading Czechoslovakia. And just in a few days, Czechoslovakia falls to Germany and is annexed. But then that's not actually the beginning of World War One, actually. So Poland, the invasion of Poland was the actual beginning of World War One. Here's why. So basically, Poland was a very influential country. It had actually developed non-aggression pact treaties with France and England. England since 1938, and they had a treaty with France since 1921. So, yeah, they had a non-aggression pact with Poland since 1921, but not that much of strong ties with Czechoslovakia, as you can see. So invasion of Poland would mean that Hitler was officially trying to regain back power in the entire European continent, which will lead to war. So then Winston Churchill, which was the new prime minister, then straight up warned Hitler, saying that if Poland was invaded, World War II would begin. But Hitler didn't listen. He went on for the offensive, and on 23rd of August 1939, the Non-Aggression Treaty Pact, the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, Non-Aggression Treaty Pact, was signed between Germany and Russia, between the defense ministers of Germany and Russia. So now you might be asking, how did Russia get involved? So basically, Germany thought it couldn't invade Poland from one side. They wanted to finish the invasion as soon as possible, because they knew that the British and French would mobilize and try to invade Germany from that side. So what they wanted to do was that they wanted to invade Poland as soon as possible, so that the French and the British don't even have time to mobilize, and the Germans can quickly get on the offensive and try to invade the French colonies. So then they had this Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, which was a non-aggression pact with Russia, and also a pact which would decide the fate of Poland. So Germany would invade Poland from the west, and then Russia would invade Poland from the east. So this overwhelming forces then finally fell on Poland from September 1st, 1939 to October 6th, 1939. In just a month span, the entire country of Poland fell. The power of the Luftwaffe, the Blitzkrieg tactics, the Soviet army, everything, the USSR's army, they just swooped in from the west, and then the Polish forces were driven off from the country and had to go near the borders of Romania so that they could build defensive positions there and try to regain back control of the country. But that was just not a possibility, because they were heavily overwhelmed, especially in the Battle of Warsaw. They were getting attacked from all directions by both the Soviet and the German forces, and it was a loss, a humongous defeat for the Polish forces. And this finally led to World War II, because that peace pact was finally broken between the French, the British, and the Polish. So finally, around September 3rd, 1939, both France and England declared war on Germany, and henceforth World War One began. So these are certain principles which we discussed in today's video about World War Two. I hope these principles are pretty clear. So before you watch any documentary or anything like that, you should first look up the principles of anything, especially this. This is a very historical global conflict of which you should be aware of. And you should be aware of the fundamentals, the basics which led to the war in the first place. So that was it guys for today's video, and if you have any doubts you can drop them in the comments and I'll get to them soon. So see you in the next one.